Related. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. In a recent speech, Dr. Ndlozi delivered a sharp warning about the state of African politics and regional unity. He opened his remarks with a direct question about current African leaders, asking where this generation of leadership came from and why they behave so differently from the freedom fighters of the past. To understand what is happening today, look back at how the continent was divided. The borders separating nations across southern Africa are not natural. They were never drawn by African people to protect local cultures or build strong states. Private charter companies, European royal families, and colonial powers used these lines to extract resources and ship wealth out of the continent. They set up small territories to serve foreign economic interests. When colonial rule ended, those artificial lines remained, trapping millions of people inside small markets that were never designed to stand alone. Look at how global power works today. A country like Botswana has a population of roughly 2 to 3 million people. In a global trade negotiation, a small nation of 2 million sits across the table from a superpower like China, which has over 1 billion people, or the United States, which commands massive economic influence. A small country standing alone has no leverage. It cannot demand fair trade terms, dictate prices, or protect its local industries.
Okay, Ramaphosa, where do you come from? Who are these people? No, honestly, who are these people? Where do they come from? Why do they sound differently to their generation? Why do they act differently to their generation? Who are these people? User. To be put in a kitchen called Mozambique. To be put in a kitchen called Botswana. To put in a kitchen called KZN. They understood that the economic destiny of Mozambique is inseparable to the economic destiny of the Eastern Cape. These borders, the true reason, the true nature, they were first private entities. They were run by private companies. Angola, Rhodesia, Cape, Province, Mozambique. They were private companies of royal families as well as literally a comprador bourgeoisie of a white settler community. They were not meant as states to survive. How can 2 million people in Botswana think they can carve a path in an economic global balance of forces that includes a population base in China of 1 billion to 2 billion people? What does Botswana say in a trade negotiation with China or with the US? That's why Europe, in the latter part of the 20th century, reorganized itself in population numbers. These states, Lesotho, there were 3 million people. Namibia. Some people, when we say Zimbabwe, they think we're talking about a huge populated 26 million people. Kept to themselves, South Africans, Zimbabweans will not be able to matter in an economy that is now a global village. You can't go back to the 19th century. You can't go back to the kingdom of Ushaga. You will perish as that kingdom did. A true economic emancipation program. A true economic emancipation program has to imagine this region like post-war Europe. We need a pulling together of massive capital investments to reignite a post-war economy. The contestation of the future we seek, the contestation of a tomorrow, either we approach it together, as Machel thought of this region, as a single unit. Either we do that together or we perish in our kitchens. Colonial capitalist extraction is already redesigning a less human future. Decolonization has to now contend seriously with autonomous digital technologies. Now, you think you're going to be conversating with China about a trade deal. In 2050, it may be a super intelligent machine that has been trained and that was born in the image of people who thought we are less than human. Either we come together and pursue SADC as a single entity, or we will perish. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for very fruitful questions. I'm very sure I'm very sure that our friend from Mozambique was speaking in Portuguese. I'm not sure, Mama Graça, I want to learn Portuguese. I'm already speaking English. But maybe Kiabetsu will be glad to know that there is a South African language in Mozambique called Shangano, Tsonga. Tsonga is there. You can learn Tsonga instead. I don't know, but I apologize. Portuguese might be too hard. It's too late. But that doesn't stop the rest of us from learning it, Bantwana Benkosi. Let's learn it because it's spoken, it's part of our regional language in Angola and in Angola as well. People when we say there must be a treatment of SADC as a single entity, yeah, do you want us to be one country? Is Europe one country? So how come here the question of fundamental regional cooperation is so bastardized? And I suggest that it's because we are losing the public discourse. We are losing the public discourse. So we shouldn't retreat. We shouldn't retreat. It's not difficult. Fanon once said, our people can understand anything on the condition you want them to. So how can Zambians for 30 years not have a single xenophobic incident housing over 5 countries? Zambia is a very small country. Very, very small. But they think of themselves as part of the region. Of course, there are opportunists, in my view, who exploit this struggle of explanation in South Africa, who had very less price to pay. You know, we don't get a lot of, Mama Machel, we don't get a lot of the government of Mozambique, for instance, over-condemning much and much. There's no noise coming from. I've just described the devastation apartheid caused in Mozambique, in Angola, in Tanzania, in Zambia. Hey! Safa in Nigeria and Ghana. Mobilized to work against or in favor of the fracture that much and much would have us believe must attain in South Africa. In comparison to Angola, in comparison to Lesotho, in comparison to Mozambique, they are not making noise. The approach of those heads of state understands the developmental challenges that produce the type of outbursts that you see, for instance, on the 30th, or that we experienced on the 30th of June. I think that hypocrisy of Nigeria and Ghana has to be called out in no equivocal terms. It is un-African. It pretends to be a pan-African outbreak. It is not. It is consummate with very reactionary forces in the West and in the Middle East that would have South Africa completely isolated from the rest of the world. It's consummate with that agenda. So no, you really can keep your country. You really can. But the point is, a developmental agenda that does not treat SADC as a single entity, it's going nowhere. That's just the brutal truth. There's a reason why all those kingdoms fell apart before colonial triumph. There's a reason why they couldn't resist colonization. Because the Zulus alone wouldn't. Abatembu alone wouldn't. They couldn't in 1700s. They're not going to do it today. Makanda couldn't do it. So will you not on the basis of being Xhosa. You're not. I'm sorry. This news that maybe you didn't know, but this is the truth. That's why these people gathered and said, let's act as one. Do not turn your back against that heritage, because it's that heritage that have me today call Ramaphosa cupcake with his dollars in his couch, and I can go home without being killed. To enter Siskai, I would have had to produce a passport. Maybe you don't know that. So you are not going to constitute a developmental project if you keep to those kitchens. You will perish. You will be enslaved again. So there was a wisdom to the Pan-African agenda. You know, the ANC is actually historically the organization of the region. But I think they've forgotten that. Certainly Panyaza doesn't know that. And Enoch Godongwan. So yes, that indeed I think must be, we have to insist, we have to educate on this question patiently and out of love. She's part of a very big frustration about the economic and living conditions. And there is really a strong belief that if all these Africans leave, it might resolve my broken school, it might resolve the crime, it might resolve unemployment, income levels, But, and which leads me to the point the program director made about, if you don't think South Africa is a post-war society, what do you think those townships are? They look exactly like Mozambique. No difference. Spaceless spaces, overcrowding, landless, unserviceable. Unserviceable. They were meant to be transit camp. They were not meant to be settlement areas. They are a product of war. Because colonization, as Mbembe would tell you, is a war. It's a necropolitical machinery. It's the machinery of death. Its product is always already the production of death, not of life.
Europe recognized this exact problem in the 20th century. After two devastating wars, European nations knew that if they stayed small and divided, they would lose power on the global stage. So, they brought their resources and markets together to form the European Union. In Africa, small states continue to act like separate, isolated economies operating in small kitchens instead of a unified house. Liberation leaders understood this reality clearly. When early leaders spoke about the Southern African Development Community, they viewed the entire region as one single economic body. The economic survival of Mozambique is directly tied to the economic survival of South Africa and Zimbabwe. The minerals, energy grids, transport lines, and labor force belong to one shared regional system. Trying to isolate one country from its neighbors is an economic impossibility. This leads directly into the internal friction tearing communities apart. The rise of xenophobia. When people live in overcrowded townships without clean water, proper housing, decent schools, or stable jobs, frustration builds up. Opportunistic politicians take advantage of this suffering. They tell local citizens that if foreign Africans leave, the schools will fix themselves, crimes will stop, and jobs will open up. That is a dangerous lie. That distracts from the real problem. Townships were created as temporary labor camps during colonial rule and apartheid. And this is why always we are preaching for the African unification. Dividing ourselves the more to suit the colonial rule is what is tearing the continent apart. Take all the African countries and their sub-regions. We are still seeing the small nations trying to work in isolation. What is happening in the continent is as a result of how we have systematically decided to remain fragmented. And until we move past that, it will be difficult. That is why today all of us are pointing a finger at each other, blaming ourselves for our problems. When we take South African for example, ever since they came out after the June 30th that we're expecting more jobs in South Africa, what do we see? The people are only crying. Unemployment rate increasing instead of reducing. This is not the Africa we are looking for. And before we can get the Africa we are looking for, these current generation leaders must take us back to what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah wanted, what Muammar Gaddafi wanted. This is not the unified Africa that our people preach. This is not the kind of leadership they were preaching. A leadership whereby a small country like Botswana, just about 2 million people, is a nation on its own. We need to continue to work together as a unified force, like what we are seeing in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. If European Union understood this perfectly, that in smaller units they cannot control, and they have decided to team up to control you, the African. What is so difficult for us to also do away with the borders, these current generation leaders, so we can also be a unified force, speaking with one voice? How do you expect us to move forward when we all want to continue to be leaders in our respective countries, facing giant populations? It is not going to help us, and it has never helped us. We must go back to what our freedom fighters fought for. They understood this message that these current generation leaders fail to understand. And that is why Africa is where it is, and we are finding it difficult progressing, like what the Kenyan woman made clear to the world. Kenyans are thinking that implementation is the problem. Implementation of the UN, of whatever that is from the oppressor, is the problem. But AES understood, named the problem, and sees that our problem is lack of using the African solution. So they look for the solution locally, and not for us to continue to be importing what other people are using for their environment in which we do not find ourselves. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, in Africa, Southern Africa, and in South Africa.